Mother, father, what's afoot? Only Possum black as soot. Mother, father, where to tread? Far from Possum and his head. Here's a bag, now what's inside? Does he seek or does he hide? Can you spy him deep within? Little Possum black as sin. Bag is open, growing wider. What's inside it, man or spider? Little boy, don't lose your way. Possum wants to come and play. Look at Possum, here he lies. Children meet his lifeless eyes. See his nasty legs and tongue. When he wakes, watch him run. Wait a while, my little child, for what is playing dead? Possum with its black balloons will eat you up in bed. Happy Valley, painted black, all the children in a sack. Wave goodbye to sun and moon, say hello to black balloon. The parcel opened, out it sprang. The black, long-legged possum man. Children run, he'll eat and smother any child without a mother. What's going on, horror fanatics? Zomboy here. You're watching Twisted Terrors. On this episode, we're going to be watching 2018's Possum. This movie was recommended to me from a viewer, and I have seen it before, but it's one of those ones where I really had to watch it again because I didn't quite remember what it was about, and I don't know if I'm going to do much justice, even though I just watched it. So this one starts off following a man named Philip. He's a recluse, a loner, and you can tell right off the bat he's very awkward with people. He lives with a man named Maurice. In the beginning of this movie, it starts off with Philip carrying a duffel bag. He unzips the bag and out comes this really long spider leg and it cuts. Cuts to Philip taking this same bag to the backyard and putting the creature that was inside of it into the fire barrel and walks away. The next morning when he wakes up, he looks over and the bag and puppet are back. This character of Philip really reminds me of the movie Willard, played by Crispin Glover. He does such a good job at portraying a personality of someone that's just shut down and pulled away from reality and other people. This movie focuses a lot in the beginning of this door in his house. He's always looking at the door. The camera spends a bit of time panning in at the door, but he never goes in the door. So you're really wondering what this door is about. Now you meet Maurice. He lives with Maurice, and Maurice is kind of a turd to Philip. And you can tell anytime Philip is around Maurice, he really shuts down. He can't look Maurice in the eye. He's very submissive. You can tell there's something really uncomfortable between the two. And Maurice is very rude to him, condescending, and really pokes fun and laughs at him all the time. And he's always pointing out having candy from the jar. And when Philip looks at the jar, you can tell it really makes him sad and uneasy, and he never eats one. Philip is always traveling with his creature in a bag. At one point, he takes it to a children's playground, and he's sitting smoking in the playground, and two people start walking up towards it, and he ends up, running over and grabbing the creature and putting it in the bag. I think he's very uneasy about other people seeing it, but for some reason he always feels like he needs to get it out. I'm not sure why. The tension in this movie is great. There's so many questions right off the bat that are unanswered, like the creature in the bag, what it is, what it looks like, Maurice, what's the backstory between those two, the door. This movie is very slow paced, but for me, I wasn't bored because I was really trying to figure out those questions right off the bat. Philip is trying to watch TV, and right off the bat, there is a news report of a 14-year-old boy that's missing, and he ends up turning the TV off pretty quickly after that.
Police are investigating the disappearance of a 14-year-old boy near Falmarsh in Norfolk. Officers are searching local woodlands and waste ground in an effort to find the teenager, who was last seen on his way home from Marshwood Secondary School in the area of Falmarsh.
You can tell the people in the town don't like him. He's walking by some teenage boys at one point, and they call him a pervert. And there's really not a lot of backstory there, but the people of this town are just really rude to him, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's shut down as well. But he is extremely awkward, and he makes that right off the bat. When the movie opens, he's staring at a boy on a train. The boy is drawing, and then he approaches the boy and asks him what he's drawing, which the boy ends up freaking out and taking off.
What were you drawing?
He's just very socially awkward, and he doesn't know how to approach people or even really have a normal conversation and not come across creepy. After those boys call him a pervert, he is found standing outside of a children's school just staring at it. One of the faculty members ends up coming out, asking him what he's doing, why he's at the school, and asks him to please move on. Again, another scene showing he's just socially awkward, and the things he do are really creepy.
Can I ask what you're doing?
Nothing.
Why are you waiting there?
It used to be my school.
Move on, will you?
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir.
In the next scene, he walks out to a river and walks out on a bridge and ends up throwing the bag into the river. And as he's walking away, he goes unconscious and falls in the mud, and he immediately starts having nightmares about the creature. And this is the first time you actually get to really see it, that it is a human head with giant spider legs that are all hairy, and you can see it's actually a puppet. And when he wakes up, he's frantic about finding the puppet, and he can't find it. He goes down to the water, the bag's nowhere to be found, and when he crawls up out of the river and he's all muddy and wet, he looks over and the creature, the puppet, is lying in the mud and is now out of the bag. He wakes up the next morning and is talking to Maurice, and Maurice wants to hear the story of the fox. And he tells his story from his childhood. Some of the boys, they found a fox that was having a hard time breathing, and they ended up kicking it to death and then put Philip's face into it, and that was traumatizing him. And this is a scene where Maurice is laughing at him, and you can tell Maurice is just super mean to Philip. You know, during the day, Philip is always walking somewhere, whether it be the forest, the river, abandoned buildings. He's always going somewhere, and they don't explain too much, except for he's, you know, always walking. And he finds his way to an abandoned building, and he ends up pulling the puppet out and starts just punching it in the face and kicking it, and you can tell he's just taking all his frustrations out on this puppet. He ends up going over and putting these large rocks into the bag. He stuffs the puppet inside, and he ends up throwing it into a water reservoir until it sinks. After he disposes of the puppet, he goes home to find a newspaper on the kitchen counter about the 14-year-old boy that's missing, and it's got a picture of him, and it is the boy from the train that was drawing that he approached. And as Philip is getting ready for bed, he can hear Maurice reading the Possum poem that I read at the beginning of this, and he goes downstairs, and Maurice has his diary, and he's reading out of it, and Philip yanks it out of his hand and asks why he's got it, and he wants to know what's up with the poem and drawings in the book. And Philip asks the unusual questions of, why didn't you burn Maurice? Why wasn't it you? And he walks away. Another question. He ends up telling Maurice that he's not going to be home anymore. And Maurice tells him, well, the trains are shut down, so you won't be able to leave. You're stuck here for the holiday. And the next day, he does end up going to the train station. He finds a completely empty train station, no employees, no trains, and he ends up having to leave. He ends up waking up in the puppet's back. He finds it hanging on his wall. So he ends up taking it off his wall, taking it downstairs where Maurice is having a bonfire in the backyard in a barrel, and chucks it in the fire, burns it up. That night, he ends up having all these nightmares about the puppet, except for this time it has no eyes. It's got these black voids as eyes, and it's super creepy. Most of the dreams in this one, especially when it's moving, they are super creepy. And in the dreams, he's having nightmares about the puppet, black smoke, and the door, the questionable door in the house. He ends up waking up in the middle of the night with someone knocking on his door. When he goes downstairs, he can hear police outside of his door. He ends up not answering it and goes back up to his room. The next day when he's watching the news, they're talking about the 14-year-old boy that's missing, and he was last seen with someone wearing a coat much like he wears. So at this point, he starts questioning himself if he had anything to do with this boy's disappearance, and he starts retracing all his steps. He goes back to the reservoirs, looking in the water, goes back to the river, looking in the river to see if he had anything to do with this boy's disappearance. He just had to prove it to himself. Maurice ends up telling him the police were just there at their house looking for him. Maurice tells him that Philip's out, and so they leave. Maurice is having these really nasty nightmares again about the puppet. He ends up waking up, and he's at the abandoned building that he's always at. But when he wakes up in the building, the spider is crawling down the wall on its own. He ends up running through the building. Every time he looks back, the spider's following him. It's coming around a corner, coming out of a doorway. Super creepy, and it's moving and following him. He ends up confronting the puppet out in the parking area, and the puppet goes face to face with him and starts wrapping his legs around him. And that's when Philip wakes up and ends up spitting out one of the candies Maurice is always trying to give him. You know, you wonder if this is all in his head, if this thing really can move. Are they fever dreams? Is he schizophrenic? You really are questioning what's going on at this point. He returns into the house looking for Maurice. You know, he's having a mental breakdown, and he finally walks up to the door he's been looking at. He opens the door, and you finally get to see in this room that's burnt to a crisp. All the walls are burnt. He looks over, and there's some sheets on the ground with 2 jars. He walks over and picks one of the jars up, and it's full of human teeth. And as he's looking at the jar, he's attacked by a masked man who also puts a bag over his head. They're wrestling on the ground, and finally the bag gets pulled off his head, and the man removes his mask. And it's Maurice. And Maurice wants to know how he knew about him taking the children.
Come to see Mummy and Daddy.
Because he saw him at the abandoned building where he used to take the kids. They're wrestling on the ground, and Maurice ends up turning him over and pulling his pants down and starts whipping him with his belt. And at this point, Philip has completely submissed to Maurice.
No! If you cry, I'll start again. No! If you cry, I'll start again. 1, 2, 3, 4.
And as he's looking over, he sees a large trunk, and it starts to move and make noise, and he realizes the kid is in there and he's still alive. So he ends up overpowering Maurice. They're wrestling again, but he's on top, and he ends up breaking Maurice's neck. He gets up, he walks over to the trunk and opens it, and the kid comes out that's been missing, who runs away with no conversation. The end of the movie is just Philip sitting on his back step. And I think this movie ends with almost the amount of questions you had when the movie started. You know, what was up with the puppet? And you realize he's just have a lot of trauma growing up. So you find out that his parents, his mom and dad, burned up in a fire in his house. Maurice is his uncle who took him in, and I think he molested him as a child, and so that's where a lot of the tension comes between them. And then he also had been kidnapping children and probably doing the same to them. There was a lot of missing children. And he finally has some relief knowing that he had nothing to do with this child missing. But, the puppet, I think, has a lot to do. He takes all his frustration on life out on this puppet, and he's always trying to get rid of it, but the puppet's always coming back. So, this movie is very slow. It's only 2 characters basically, but the tension is great and the questions aren't answered till the end, and then some aren't. But I definitely recommend it for those that are okay with a slow art piece. It's rated pretty high. This one is rated 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb and 3.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So this one people like. It is just a slow burn. You got to be ready for that. But I like the movies where you're constantly thinking and there's a lot of questions. So if you like those movies, I highly recommend it. Check it out. Just be ready for a slow movie, and you will probably be okay. You got to be in the mind frame for it. So definitely check it out if you haven't seen it. This was a viewer recommendation. So there you go. Go watch it. I appreciate watching Twisted Terrors. I'm Zomboy, and I will see you on the next one. Appreciate watching. See you later.